So I just want to start with like your history, like where you're from in the U.S., like your family heritage.
hmm Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, 1979, June 16th, the same day as my older sister. We're born the same day, 2 years apart. So we're always kind of twins. That plus Gemini's plus.
I'm a Gemini, June
Okay.
17th.
June 16th, so right, one day apart. My great grandmother was June 18th. And for both of us, she thought we were going to be born on her birth date. So she would be like, yeah, yeah, got one. I got one finally. Nope. Then this one comes, all right, got one. Nope.
Almost.
Yeah, almost. Um, but with my parents, um, around the time I turned one, my father was raised in Brooklyn. My mother was born in Harlem but raised in Connecticut. And when you say Brooklyn, you're basically talking about the islands, right? So, in my case, for my father's side, he had family in St. Kitts on his father's side, and in Barbados on his mother's side. And we say Harlem, usually you're talking about black people who migrated up from the south. And that was the case. My mother's side, both sides were from North Carolina. But she wasn't raised in Harlem. She was born in Harlem. Her mother was a jazz singer, so she was up in New York doing her jazz thing. But my mother was raised by her grandmother, so we always grew up knowing her grandmother as our grandmother. It's like that's just grandma. But so when I was one, my father, saw a lot of the changes that were coming to New York. So whereas when he was young, you could go into anybody's house and, things were very much of a community. Everybody knew each other on the block and so forth. To now you have, drugs coming in. Reagan was coming into office in 1979, so 1980. So my father was like, we gotta get out of, New York. He could see what was coming, and we know in retrospect what did come, the crack epidemic and all this, stuff. So, and then beyond that, my parents were very much African centered. Now in New York, you can get a lot of what you could call African centered consciousness. You can go to lectures and everything else, or African centered schools and so forth. But in terms of the actual practice of it, it's very difficult to do in terms of saying we want to be free. Because if you're in New York, if you get hungry, where are you going with the grocery store, which isn't owned by you? Or if you get sick, where are you going with the hospital? You don't own anything. So they decided to move down to the south and build their own log cabin in the woods. So this is 1980 that they started to move down, and they sold the brownstone house that they had, which later on got sold for $3 million, but they didn't get that for it. And matter of fact, there was a movie called Crooklyn, right, from Spike Lee. If you ever see the poster, that's on the stoop of our house. That's 7 Arlington Place. So, anyway, they sold that and decided to move down to North Carolina, which is where my mother's side of the family had been enslaved. And it was one county where they were enslaved in Johnston County, and where we moved was Wake County because that's where my grandmother and basically all of her siblings had moved to. And with the Johnston County, my one of my ancestors actually had he owned what became downtown Clayton, but like many black people, that land got stolen to make downtown Clayton. A similar thing that you'll hear like with Rosewood or Wilmington or Tulsa or whatever. Black-owned land wasn't respected as black-owned land. They just basically took it and did what they wanted to with it. So, my that side of the family moved to Wake County, which is where Raleigh and the capital of the state is. And that's where I was raised, out in a rural area, a place that goes by various names. Some people call it Riley Hill. Some people call it Lizard Lick. Some people call it Wendell, because Wendell is the closest town.
So the town like your town is name.
Something like that, because it's a block, like a country block, where one side of the block is about 1 mile long, the other side of the block is like 7 miles long.
Wow.
Cows on it, that type of deal. Yeah, very rural. And matter of fact, I was just at Mampong, which is in Equapim, and it's a rural town. And as I was driving through there, I was like, this is just like growing up, like dirt roads and like goats running around and that type of deal. Um, but my parents moved down, and when you're young, that's all you know is what you're growing up with. But we all grew up in a house that was about the size. Well, this is when I was very young before they were able to build more, but probably about the size of this room, maybe times two. And it was five of us. No running water. We cooking on a wood stove. We had, literally, of course, no furnace. You just chop your wood, and that's what you do. From Brooklyn, city slickers. Born and raised city slickers, but they were like, yo, we're trying to get free, and part of being free is doing for yourself, right? So they eventually from that ended up becoming a shed that we called the Little House, but that's where we were growing up at. They built a log cabin with their own hands, chainsaws, axes, built their log cabin, again, city slickers. My mother did all the cabinet work, and they worked together on the roof, and just the whole structure is, the walls are logs that are laid out and caulked it all together. So I remember that. What I remember from it is maybe being about 3 years old, and there was a song called Hard Work, and I think that's the only lyrics of the song, Hard Work. Dun 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 dun. Hard work. What is it, like something handy or something? But anyway, I remember like running around with a hammer in my hand, just running. I didn't have anything, just running. Hard work. And we're listening to that. But yeah, so it was a very rural lifestyle. And I remember later on growing up and finding out that people bought dogs. And I was like, why do you buy dogs? Because there are wild dogs all around. So like if dog in the woods would give birth, usually they'd like bring one puppy to our doorstep. Then then you have a dog. So I was like, you buy dogs? What are you talking about buying dogs? They just are out there. But later on, I guess the county whatever came and got rid of a lot of those wild dog packs. But they used to just roam. And one thing that I did later on that was a bit dangerous in retrospect is that I would take my dogs, which were usually around 4 at any given time, and I would take them out to go fight the wild dogs. So I'd take my metal baseball bat and like, yeah, let's go fight the dogs. And I look back, I was like, that's probably pretty dangerous because it's just me, and I don't know how old I was at that time, like 7, whatever.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so that was growing up in North Carolina. So I went to, even though I lived in the rural, I always went to school first in Durham because my mother was doing her PhD at Duke in psychology. My father had already done his doctorate at Columbia, and that's where they met, at Columbia University in New York. And we got a fly in here, so. But anyway, they had the whole child day school, which was a very African-centered school. But that's all I got in terms of African-centered school. For the rest, I was in public school. So I grew up with an African name. Imagine in the 80s growing up, it's before being African was cool. And so a lot of fighting, over that. For my family, we never celebrated any white horror days. So we didn't stand up for the flag. We never sang the national anthem. Like, we don't do that.
So you kind of grew up with this like Black Power centric.
Yeah, however you want to call that. Yeah, whatever that is, that. Because my parents, even before I was born, my parents, instead of exchanging wedding rings with blood diamonds or whatever else, they exchanged African names, and then they chose the family name. So this is, how many years? 5 years before I came on the scene. So I was already being born into. Then I was born at home. And matter of fact, my midwife was just here in a meeting that we had like a week or so ago, and I know her. But they had Nana Dinizulu. They had the Dinizulu dancers and drummers. This is in New York, and they were practicing Akan spirituality. So all the Akomfo, these are the healer diviners. They had Brem. Kodo me say yen shiamonti me say no num nifa na baba I'm about to start speaking tree. Um, where was I?
Your midwife.
Yeah, so they started up. Actually, this was for my older sister, the one who was born 2 years before me. All of the Alconfor, they were also training as midwives. So, my older sister was born at home. Then I was also, born at home. So that's what we were on. We like do for self, you give birth, and that's how all my children were born as well. All of them were born at home with midwives. So the main midwife was just here, which is like a small world. But I used to, when we would go back up to Brooklyn for the African Street Festival, my parents would always be like, "All right, that's another one of your midwives." It'd be like 20. I'm like, all of these women couldn't have been there. Like, yeah, they were. But yeah. So I think it was, in retrospect, a very unique experience. But of course, going through public school, then you end up having to fight your way through that, mainly against the black people who want to call you African booty scratcher and blah 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 blah. So yeah, and then eventually, I became president of the National Society of Black Engineers in high school. I went to Morehouse on a full academic scholarship, which was going to be that 3-2 scholarship where you do the first 3 years at Morehouse, then 2 years at Georgia Tech. I interned at IBM, so I was on that track. But then I was like, I don't want to do engineering. I want to do something to help black people, which of course engineering could have helped black people, but I decided to go in for like classes like sociology and African studies and all these things. And at that time, I also took classes at Morris Brown that had cross registration. So there at the AUC, that's Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, and what is it? ITC, Interdenominational Theological Center. And I think they changed the name since then. And then, Morris Brown. So if you wanted the African classes, you had to go to Morris Brown because they had like an enclave, like a little revolutionary thing going on. So I would go over there and take Medu Neter, what they call hieroglyphs, which I'm actually now conducting a study group here now for that. And I'm part of a group that's translating multiple texts from ancient Kemet. Cultural anthropology, where we'll go down to the Gullah Sea Islands, Sapelo, and all this. So, and my degree was in African American studies. That was like the most revolutionary track that you could get at that place, which was basically, when they call it Morehouse, I used to say it's to create Morehouse Negroes. Just get your suit and tie, go work for white people, and it's like, what's that? But yeah, actually, this is tied to me coming here for my junior year of study abroad. So I was already conversational and intrigued before that because my mother brought me here in '98, then again in '99. So I was learning a lot on my own. Then I started studying formally here with Professor Ajikum, who's still here. He's head of School of Performing Arts. And then by that second semester, so they had the study abroad CIEE program. But because I was already conversational, they had me do one-on-one classes with Professor Ajikom, which was great because we just read Anansi stories and like, this is cool. And then by the second semester, I was taking classes with native speakers that were entirely taught in the language, tested in the language. We write our essays in Chi. So that was fun. So by the time I got back to the U.S., my teacher of Medu Neter was like, all right, you got to go to grad school for African languages. And that's how I ended up at Wisconsin because they had a PhD program for African language and literature. And I ended up getting one master's in African language and literature, another one in linguistics. And then my supervisor, who was like my biggest fan, she ended up blocking me from getting my PhD committee together. And I ended up finding out why later on. But in higher education, there's all these politics and whatever. But anyway, that ended up being a great thing because that made me decide to come here to do my PhD. In between, I went to Chicago, where I taught at Northeastern Illinois University, Chicago State University, Malcolm X College. Where else? Another college, one of the other colleges, and I'm forgetting. But then also at some of the high schools, DuSable Leadership Academy, Charles Hamilton Houston Alternative High School, Barbara Sizemore, Betty Shabazz, like everything that's black in the whole area. I was teaching at all of them, usually at the same time. And then I had a situation where Also was there doing capoeira, which is African combat science, and then also survival training, where we would take children from Chicago, from some of the schools I was working at, and then take them out into the woods, teach them shelter construction, wild food foraging, firearms training, open hand combat training, all these things. Um, so one time coming back from that, the police pulled me over, and I had my handgun in the trunk, unloaded, whatever. But they pulled me over, and they were like, "All right, we don't have any reason to stop you, but we're going on a fishing trip." So that means they're just gonna search and then find something. So when they found the handgun, they decided to change the story. Instead of it being in the back of the trunk, they said it was under my seat and loaded, like I'm about to do a drive-by or something. So anyway, $10,000 later, we beat the case. Of course, we had a witness, and their case was completely unbelievable. It's like at night, no street lights. You saw a black gun underneath the seat. I had my teaching board, a whiteboard just like this for teaching, laid across the back of the seat. It's like, what are you even talking about? And they send the cases from Chicago out to a place called Bridgeview, and it was this old white guy, like maybe in 60s at least, but like looked like one of the those, if you see the pictures of the old lynchings, this looks like one of the guys who was there standing. But even he was like, and they have something like a 99.999% conviction rate. But even he was like, this is ridiculous. He threw it out. But, again, you wasted how many, like a good year and a half, thousands of dollars, people flying in from throughout the country to support, my parents, all type of stress and whatever. So as I was sitting there on the witness stand in that situation, I said, never again am I going to allow myself to be subjected to the whim of just a random white person who happens to say, all right, let's just arrest you. Because even if you beat the case, you wasted money, time, and I was supposed to get married to my current wife at that time, but because of not being able to leave the state, couldn't do it. But we ended up getting married here in Ghana, which was, yeah. So yeah, all of that, took me through Chicago, and then I decided, all right, I'm coming to Ghana, I'll do my PhD. I was actually deciding between the places where I speak the language, the indigenous languages, so it was between Ghana, Nigeria. I was also considering Gambia or Senegal, because I speak Wolof as well. Nigeria is... You went to where, Senegal?
Yes.
Denga Wolof?
I did, I loved it so much.
Denga Wolof?
I took it with some classes right before.
Alright. So I'm asking, do you hear Wolof?
It's hard.
Nangade?
Mangi Pirak.
Alright, so that's cool. I was also looking at Senegal and the Gambia as a possibility, also because I did Kiswahili in undergrad, but I never really liked it because there's so much Arabic in it. I'm trying to get rid of English, not get more Eurasian languages. But I'm still conversational on that, so I also consider East Africa like Tanzania or Kenya. But I decided on Ghana mainly because of my undergrad experience here. I already knew a lot of the professors in the linguistics department. That's what I was doing, was linguistics, because of my language training at that time. So I decided to come to Ghana, and I came in 2008 and started the PhD program in 2009, finished in 2012. And when I finished, I ended up getting this, which was an award for the best PhD thesis in the year that I came out. Appreciate it. It's the first time an African out of the diaspora has gotten that award.
Wow.
Right? And then last year I got this award for the best publication in the humanities, which is also the first time an African from the diaspora has gotten that award. So, but basically, some people say when we're here, we're like pioneers, because anything you do is like the first time an African has sneezed on this thing. It's like, all right. But, it was cool. And then I was employed here at African Studies, and I became the editor-in-chief for Ghana Journal of Linguistics. And do I have a copy of that here? I may have. So I can show you what it looks like. I'm not sure what it is. I have old copies of it, but I became the editor-in-chief of the Ghana Journal of Linguistics. The former editor actually passed away, but she wanted to make sure that I was editor-in-chief before she passed away. Figured I'd do a good job with it. So since I've been editor-in-chief, this is, when did I start? The beginning of sometime like March of 2016. So we've had 2 issues that have come out so far. We have a special guest issue that's coming out. So yeah, and that's, where I am now. Right now, my goal for this year is to publish 10 publications, articles, book chapters, and so forth and so on. And that's because, some people are like, all right, if you get 2 or 3 publications in a year, it's like, yeah, you're doing good. Like, we got work to do. Let's
How
get.
many have you done so far?
So far this year is 7.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
You're gonna say.
Yeah, I should, all things being equal, I should definitely get it because I have 2 more book chapters that are in the works. And as long as those come out this year, that should be 9. And then I have lots of different things that I'm working on, so any of those come through.
These are personal publications.
Yeah. So some of them I've collaborated with others on, but for the most part, it's single author. Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah, appreciate
so
it.
what kind? So a part of like being able to access like Pan-African thought is like the means. So economically, like what type of class did you come from in the U.S. And like the access that you had to this kind of knowledge?
This is, a good question. Like I said, when I was young, my father, he had his doctorate, but he was sweeping chimneys for a living. And we were in a little house like this. But, he had gotten his doctorate at Columbia. He eventually started teaching at St. Augustine's College. My mother, she, eventually was able to complete her doctorate at Duke, University. So growing up, like especially I would say from 1 to 10, and I really didn't think about it until I went to public school. I was like, are we poor? Because everybody else, and I guess they were in the projects or whatever, but everybody else had Jordans, and I had like the knockoff brand. We had knockoff everything because my parents were like, we're not trying to support our enemies. Why are we trying to give Nike and blah blah blah? My money, of course, being a child, you don't really understand that fully, but it's like, whatever. So, just in terms of that, we didn't grow up feeling like we had, cash, because we actually didn't have, cash like that per se. And my father, actually, my parents were just here, and he was, I won't tell you the whole story, but he was like, yeah, at one point, they were down to the last $25. He was like, all I have is $25 in my pocket. And just a dollar in a dream, like we're gonna make this happen. But they eventually are able to turn things around, so that by the time we were in our teens, things started being a little bit better. But for me, the African knowledge was something that you live out, as opposed to, I don't know how other people see it, but like we used to do Kwanzaa, and they had what was called the Umoja group, and this is in Durham, but then there was also another group in Fayetteville, and one of the people from the Fayetteville group is actually Ewe, and he's since come back to Ghana, Professor Tupra. And so especially, like I said, early childhood, we didn't get too much of the, all right, we got cash type of deal, we're doing something because we got cash. It was more like, no, you just do with what you have. You make your own. So like, we didn't grow up getting, all right, you get this present or you get what it's like. No, you make your own things. My mother sewed clothes, she baked and everything. So we really got a sense. And it wasn't until I got to college that I, came across other people who didn't have any of that type of thing. So like, I don't know how to iron my clothes. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, all right, like this isn't a skill. What are you talking about? But there were people who really, they had never done anything. So, again, that's how we experienced it, from no cash. But you don't really need cash if you are growing your own food. You don't really need cash so we never had a mortgage. So my parents were building a log cabin, but once they're done, that's it. They own it other than property taxes, which, you know, you got to scrape to get. But we never had a mortgage. We never had a new car. And no one in my family, immediate family, has ever owned a new car. Like, we would be, if it's like 1990, we have like a 1980 car. If it's 2000, we got like a 1990 car. So, you know, in terms of, I guess, the trappings of whatever class is, which again, you know, the class analysis is basically, you know, in my view, a way of getting people to not identify as black people primarily, which is why white people came out with the class analysis, to make you not identify with black people primarily. It's like, you know, whatever your descendants are, they don't care. Like Oprah, she goes into a store and say you can't afford the bag. It's like nobody cares what your class is. It's like you could look at Kwame Nkrumah. He's the highest class in Ghana, but they're going to do a coup d'etat against him. Or Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba. They don't care about any of this class stuff. They're like, if you black, you black. They got a plan for you. But you got these white folks called Marx and whatever, and then the black parrots who just say whatever they say. They give you an ideology because the ideology is created to keep them in power. So if they can send you off on a dummy mission of class, then you can start thinking, oh, well, because I got X cash or whatever. That don't matter. You're subjected to genocide. No matter where you go on the planet, you're going to get shot, beat, spat on, or whatever, because nobody's asking you where's your bank account. So, but anyway, just saying that, all of that to come back to the point that you know, for us, we didn't have, you know, much cash. We didn't have much trappings of whatever this class thing is supposed to be. But that's not what it was about for us. It was doing for self. Yeah.
So speaking, like, class is such a big part of like my project because I'm a global studies major, which is cultural studies and global political economy. And so you mentioned Marx, and as I'm looking at class, Marx has become a big part of my project.
Of course.
And so, what are your like opinions on the whole like global political economy and like the forefathers, or you know what we consider global political economy to be?
Right. There's a quote from, and I'll come directly to your question. There's a quote from Dr. Khalid Muhammad, who's passed on, but he said, and he was given his own experience. He was like, anytime he was in a capitalist country, anywhere the black-white dynamic exists, the white capitalist will be on the top and the black capitalist will be on the bottom. If he's in a socialist country, as long as that black-white dynamic exists, the white socialist will be on top, the black socialist on the bottom. You look at Cuba or whatever, you know, Castro, whatever, the white socialists are going to be on top, black or communists, whatever you want to call them. He said same thing, communist country, white communists on top, black communists on the bottom. If it's a Christian country, white Christians on top, black Christians on the bottom. If it's a Muslim country, the white Muslims on top. If it's a Buddhist country, if it's a Hindu country, if it's a, you know, whatever country. So again, you know, if we're talking about a revolution, we're talking about revolving, changing, you know, the state of affairs. If you're just talking about shifting cash from one place to another, you're not doing anything, and that's the whole point, is for you not to be doing anything, because now you get more cash or you get more whatever is your marker of class. You know, that doesn't change anything from your descendants. They're still subjected to genocide. So at the Kwame Nkrumah conference, myself and my graduate assistant, none of y'all, we looked at the definition of genocide, the 1948 definition of genocide, as consisting of killing members of the group. Actually, let me just read it out for you. Any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So we're looking at the US, South Africa, and India, and black people in all those three places as definitely qualifying for genocide based on all of those things. So we showed examples in the past of lynchings, and then the contemporary lynchings, the shootings in the streets, you know, in the US. Same thing in South Africa, showing the so-called apartheid time. But basically what we're driving at is that when our enemies, as you know, these pale Eurasians that they call themselves, white people or whatever they call themselves, whether it's Arabs or Chinese or Japanese or French or Dutch or whatever, that in order to make sure that you don't solve the problem, they help to misidentify the problem in the first place. So the problem, right? So everything, despite the fact you're being lynched, you're being shot, you're being stabbed, you were enslaved, you were stolen and taken to stolen land. Now we call you a thief. All these issues that we have, no, your problem is just that you need integration, which is basically just saying get closer to the ones who are perpetuating genocide, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental. Just come closer to them. It's like how in the world is that a solution to your problem of genocide? Then same thing in South Africa. So you have so-called apartheid. So again, they stole the land, they stole the platinum mines, they stole all the most fertile land. They shifted you into these Bantustans, and we can go on and on. They killed over 10,000 Zulus in the Bambata rebellion. Like we can go through all of this, definition of genocide that we qualify for. They say, you know what, the problem is just apartheid. You're apart from us. We'll let you come and sit on the bus. Shut up. Now you can't say anything. We got rid of apartheid. Now just don't worry. Then same thing in India, where again you have these Indo-Aryans, which Gandhi called himself. He said he was very anti-black.
A lot of people don't know that.
They know now, at least in Ghana they do, because they put a statue up of this guy. So what I did, I sent out to the entire university about 70 or so of his most racist quotes. All the professors were like, we didn't know.
He was also like very misogynistic.
Exactly. And slept with his niece and
refused the same medicine that he used to say himself, refused to give it to his wife.
Exactly. So his wife died, but then later on he says, Epiphany, I can take it. I think it was quinine. So anyway, all of that is to say, so in India, the exact same thing. You have the Dalits, the black untouchables of India, and you have these pale Indo-Aryans. So the Brahmins, symbolically, they say that the color of Brahmin is white, the color of Kshatriya is red, the color of the Vaishya, that's the sellers and traders, that's what Gandhi was, is yellow, and then the Shudras are black. And that's the lowest caste. But then you have the outcasts, which are the Dalits, and then the scheduled caste.
I went to Catholicism in middle school.
Okay.
But in my 8th grade, we got to take different religions.
So you got a chance to find out about Hinduism.
Yes.
So it's a divine sanction for. So when people talk about karma, I'm like, you don't know what that word is and what it means to black people, because that's now the excuse to say anything we do to you, you deserve it. So I can rape you, stab you, kill you, burn you, and it's just your karma. Intergenerational, substantiation for anything that I do to you. So again, and the point I was about to say, Gandhi was talking to the British in his own writing and say, we're co-colonists of these savages. So he was like, yeah, all of us Indo-Aryans need to come together. So that's that. But anyway, back in India, the Dalits were subjected to being burned, raped, killed, tortured, so forth and so on, and still are to this day. But they say the problem is just untouchability. You're not allowed to touch us. So we'll allow you to come into the temples, allow you to drink water at the tank, and now just shut up. Now you can't say anything. So in all three of those cases, the problem is genocide. And even more so, the problem are these white Eurasians who are committing genocide against black people. But instead of us focusing on the actual problem, excuse me, then the problem just becomes integration, right? Then the problem becomes apartheid. Then the problem becomes untouchability. So you never actually deal with the problem, which are these white Eurasians. Now you just deal with, and there's an analogy. Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, again, he talks about the spider versus the spider web. So anytime you're mentioning a problem as anything other than a person, you're dealing with a spider web. And he's like, when people say, oh, the problem isn't white people, it's the system. He's like, you a fool for saying that. That's like saying the problem isn't the spider, it's the spider web. It's like, well, who created the spider web? So we get caught up saying the problem is whatever, capitalism. Well, who created that? Or the problem is Christianity. Or the problem is, Islam. Or it's like the problem is neoliberalism. All these things, if you keep just taking down the spider webs, and you never deal with the spider, you come back the next time and that white spider has weaved another web. But for some people, they're just I would say some like cowards, so they don't want to deal with the problem because they feel like they can't deal with the problem. So now they say the problem is class. So now they go, well, who created these classes? The exact same white spider who created the Christianity and all these other things we're talking about. Uh-huh. That's Khalid Muhammad gives that analogy. Another analogy is Bobby Wright, Dr. Bobby Wright, who's also passed on, a noted psychologist, where he talks about the matador and the bull, and he said he says that our situation as black people is analogous to that of a matador and a bull. So the matador has his cape, and then the bull goes and chases the cape. And as he chases the cape, you do this, and then you stab the bull as it runs by. And then the bull comes back again. Then you hold up another cape, or just the same cape. You just then the bull comes charging after the cape, then boom, stab you. Then this keeps going on until the bull is on its last legs, and that's what they say is called the moment of truth. And it's believed that that's the very first time that the bull actually sees the matador. But by that time, it's too late. So now the matador just comes up, and you're done. And this is what happens to us as black people, is that we chase after class, or race, or this or that or whatever. We never just deal with the white people who are doing all these things, who created the racism or the classism or the whatever ism, neoliberalism, or the whatever you want to call it. And this is why we're in the situation that we're in. We're never actually dealing with the cause. We're just dealing with all the effects. And there's another Dr. Nana Kwekwe where he says that excuse me, the situation is like if you go into the kitchen and the tap is on, now you realize that there's all this water on the floor. And you have a couple options. He says what most people do, at least in our situation, is that we'll take a mop and we just start mopping the floor, but the tap is still running. But you're mopping the floor, and then you squeeze it out, and then you keep mopping, and the tap is still running. It's like you're not going to do anything unless you turn off the tap. You understand? Before you do any of these other remedial, reparatory things, you have to deal with the tap, in the first place. There's another analogy about, you go to a river and you see a child floating in the water. You go rushing and save the child. You take the baby back to the shore, and then here's another child. Then you go and save that one, a baby, and then you save that one, put that one on the shore. Then two more, and then you're trying to swim across the river, and you're getting tired. But at some point, you have to go and find out who's throwing these babies into the water upstream. So all of these are basically just saying the exact same thing, that we have genocide that's committed by these white Eurasians all throughout the world. In India, in South Africa, in Australia, Tasmania, they exterminated all of the pure-blooded Tasmanians off the face of the planet. The only ones who are left are the women who they raped, and they allowed the children to survive. But Truganini was the very last full-blooded Tasmanian. She looks more African than any African you'll ever see. But, this is our situation in South America, all over. Genocide at the hands of these white Eurasians. So the class argument is another spider web, another cape, another mop and bucket, another, scuba diving to go hop in and save a baby instead of going and finding out, let's take care of these white folks who keep throwing black babies into the river.
So how do you deal with the deep-rooted Christianity in Ghana? Because I'm staying on campus, and I'm staying near that big field where all night.
Not only students, professors.
And then you have the place across the street where the male professors come to drink, and so I'm in the taxi, and you see this white Jesus all over the taxis and stuff. So how do you deal with that? So
yeah, it was very frustrating when I was here for study abroad. For multiple reasons, to the point where at the end of my year, I was like, I gotta go back to the U.S. so I never have to see another white Jesus, and so I never have to see another American flag, which is, somehow I guess ironic.
Yeah.
But where we are, we only have red, black, and green flags. We don't have no American flags. But the main thing that I do is I educate. So I let people know that this whole story of Holy Trinity is stolen from the pyramid text. Also found in the coffin text, also found in this book, the Peret in Peru. Let me pick that up. The Book
Can I
of
see
Coming
that
Forth
book?
by Day.
I've only seen this book. I feel like when they talk about it in movies or like.
Oh, really?
If you go to the end, that's where you can see the actual middle lecture. Before that, it's just a translation of it. So yeah, you know, I'll help them to understand that the whole story of a Savior who was died and resurrected, that was stolen. And matter of fact, I want to do. Let me turn this back on for you. I want to do a talk on what was Israel in relation to black people. Because, like most black people, as soon as they get their hands on the Bible, everybody wants to be the protagonist in the story. So they get their hands on the Bible, that's us. We're the Hebrews and blah. And that's been going on since the so-called Great Awakening in the U.S. Because, as you're probably aware, before that, right, you know, the papal mandate was for the Portuguese and the Spanish to reduce to servitude all infidel people. So that means if you're not Christian, then you can be enslaved. So that was a major impetus for not, you know, converting black people to Christianity, because they're like, well, the whole point is just to enslave you. We're not trying to actually save your souls. So, excuse me. But at the Great Awakening, and there's a brother, Kambon, who has a book on how to make a Negro Christian, and basically looking at the role of this white guy, Charles Colcock Jones, in, you know, coming up with a rationale to say, you know what, we can convert them. We'll just say that we have freed them. We freed them in the by and by. We freed them spiritually. We gave them Christianity. So we did free them, but we'll just keep them in bondage physically. So, you know, from that point going, we're talking about around the 1800s, early 1800s, because before that, people were practicing African spiritual systems. You have root women and root men and all these things, but that's where you start to have Negro spirituals and whatever. So when people start talking about Negro spirituals and Christian hymns and whatever, like, you know, that's very recent. That's not like the whole enslavement. If you're going to at least go from William Tucker in 1619 all the way up to the 1800s, that's not the majority of the time black people were there, you know, enslaved. But anyway, you know, coming back to dealing with the Christianity, you know, here is one just letting people know that the flood story was stolen from the story of the Golden Lotus. The story of the destruction of mankind. The parting of the water story is stolen from the story of the Golden Lotus. There's all these aspects, Holy Trinity, all of that is stolen from black people. So for the talk on the what was Israel in relation to black people, I got a chance to go to Kemet last year and actually physically see what I had read about before, the Merenptah Stela, where it's the very first mention of Israel in the history of the entire world. And it mentions Israel as the enemies of black people. And even in antiquity, you had Manetho, you had Ptolemy of Mendes, you had Josephus Flavius. All of them identified these so-called Hebrews with the Hyksos. Now, the Hyksos were a group that came out of southwestern Eurasia and overran Kemet, and then they were finally driven out by Amos. Now we say Amos is like this, and I can. Well, do I have a pen? I mean, whiteboard pen. I wanted to show you this. Yeah, I do. So anytime you hear these so-called Hebrews or Jews or whatever they call themselves talk about Yah or Yahweh or Yah whatever, that this is E-A. That's an aspirated H. And the determinative of a woman, usually in this way, but it can also be done horizontally. So this was the major moon deity at the time that the Hyksos were expelled. So when they're talking about praise Yah or whatever, they're talking about the moon deity of ancient Kemet. So Yah, and then this is a determinative to let you know that we're actually talking about the moon. So, you know, even their understanding of Yah or anything, and then the same thing for Amen. So when they talk about, at the end of their prayers or whatever, and they say Amen, this is actually the name of another major deity. You have a determinative. Falcon on the standard, and that lets you know you're talking about a divinity. So all these things that are supposedly Christian or whatever, you say your prayer and then you say Amen. You're saying the name of a deity of ancient Kemet. When they're talking about Yahweh or Yah or anything, they're talking about another deity. So, and these are when you're talking about Yamos, that's the one who was able to finally drive them out and expel them from Kemet. That one, you come to understand that the so-called Hebrews or Jews or whatever plagiarize all of these things that they're saying without giving, of course, plagiarism, without giving any credit that we got this story from here, we got that story from there, we got the name of this deity from there, we got boom, boom, boom. Because they came uncultured, eventually they started to learn all these stories about all these divinities. So when they were finally driven out by Yamos, now this is a thing that a lot of their biblical characters, there's no proof that any of them existed, but the mummy of Yamos, you can go to Waset right now and go see it, right? Look blacker than either me or you, right? And like, this is a real person. He drove them out. And also beyond plagiarism is that you get understanding the very first spin doctor type of story, because in their story they say that they were enslaved and let my people go, blah blah blah. No, that's not how it was. They came as conquerors and then they left with their tail between their legs, right? Eventually being defeated by the black people coming from deep South Kemet and Waset. So yeah, I let people know all this information. They do whatever they want to with it, but the idea is that they do what they do because they don't know any of this. They've never heard it before. Once they know it, then they can do whatever they want, whether they believe it or don't believe it. I say, I don't want you to believe it. I want you to start researching now. I want you to say, I don't believe any of it, but then you go and you read the dictionary, concise dictionary, Middle Egyptian, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. Yah as the moon deity. Let me show you. So this is one. So that's when they talk about Imun or Amun, they're talking about this deity. So at the end of all their prayers, they're calling out this deity. And like, just if you know how to read, and that's another one of our problems, is that we don't know how to read anything except for Latin characters, which makes us functionally illiterate and cut off from the majority of human knowledge. And then here we go. Ia. It has a different determinative. This is the one that I did. You'll see it like this, also horizontally, like this. So Ia, and then the horizontal determinative that lets you know the crescent is letting you know we're talking about a moon. Moon, satellite, as a divinity, right? So, again, there's a quote that I always like to cite by Dr. Runoko Rashidi, where he says, what we do for ourselves depends on what we think of ourselves. What we think of ourselves depends on what we know of ourselves, and what we know of ourselves depends on what we have been told. And told as an analogy for have been exposed to. So people are doing all this stuff that you're seeing on the field or whatever because they haven't been told anything about themselves. So that makes your highest aspiration just to be a Hebrew or whatever. And then the other thing, let me show you this too, is that the Merim Patah Stela, it talks about all these southwestern Eurasians who had finally been conquered. So it talks about Gezer, Ashkelon, Yanoam, and it says Israel, and that's the very first time it's mentioned, is without seed, is no more, basically has been finally vanquished. And about, so that's Merim Patah, and then you have who they call Ramesses III, and in his tomb he actually has a depiction of what those Hyksos look like, the Amu, and I want to show you that as well. And when I do this presentation, I'm going to hold up a mirror and ask all these people who've been calling themselves Hebrew, does that look like you? So if you can come around. So this is actually a photograph of this. You can see what I'm about to show you here on this wall, but this is how the people of Kemet, what they call Egypt, depicted themselves as Ramech, man and woman, plural determinative. And then these are the Amu, the Asiatics, and then this is a reproduction of that same one. So this is them,
the depiction of the people they've seen.
Exactly, exactly. And neither one of them look like any kind of black people I ever seen.
No.
But interestingly, the people of Kemet depicted themselves the same as the people of Nubia, which are even further down to the south, in terms of, you know, complexion, of course, dress, culture, so forth and so on. So you have two different kinds of Ramech, these are the people of Kemet, and two different kinds of Nehesi, which are the people of Nubia, and then these two different kinds of Amu. And then these are those other Amu who had already invaded North Africa in what we now know as Libya, Algeria, that they had started already coming in at that point in time. But yeah, all of this is just, you know, to come to that exact same point.
And you haven't given this presentation?
No, not yet, not yet. So what I'm showing you is actually from another presentation on the ancient African origins of Pan-Africanism. So when they're talking about Kemet, Kemet means black people, and when they have a determinative of man and woman, it's talking about people. As a determinative of a circle with a crossroads in the middle, it's talking about a human settlement, a community. So when they're talking about Kemet, they're talking about black people.
Kemet means black people.
Black people, exactly. Of course, white folks like to translate as Egyptians, but the word is black and the determinative is people. But this is what your enemies are going to do. Enemies are going to enemy. Let me show you this one too, so you can see that for all of these words it's black, but then when it finally gets to the same black with people after it, they say, no, that just means Egyptian. But this is exactly what we expect. So you can kind of see. So here, Kem, black.
Yeah.
Here, Kemet, the black land. Now what the whites like to do is say, well, they just mean the soil is black. They don't mean the people are black. However, the people in their own mythology said they were made out of the soil. So you're still stuck. And then you have the same Kemet, man and woman, and they just translate as Egyptians. Now it's black everywhere, black, 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 black. But now they say, no, it just means, you know, Egyptians.
So the original Egyptians are black.
That's the only
That's the only interpretation
right?
that you can take.
Right. And of course we know that the ones who are there now are the result of invasions by the Hyksos. You have Assyrians, Persians, all these enemies of black people who came in either in mass or little by little. Greeks, Romans, Vandals, Mamluks, Arabs, so forth and so on. And the Arabs that you see, it's not even all of modern day Egypt. Once you get down to Aswan is where you start seeing black people like your complexion. right? And then you go even further south, you see people like my complexion, darker, and so forth and so on. Going into Sudan, where you see the blackest people on the face of the planet, which are exactly as the people of Kemet were depicted at that point in time. But you see, even after all these thousands of years, you still got black people there. Even, but in Cairo, when you get to the furthest north, they're just like any other Arabs. But yeah, this is a presentation that I want to do because a lot of, and this is like a bit of a sidebar, but a lot of this whole Hebrew thing is because when you get your hands on the Bible, it's like if you take a child to a superhero movie, Superman, when he gets home, he's going to put a towel around his neck and say, I can fly. Everybody wants to be the protagonist. So you get that book and then you say, well, I'm the chosen people. Yeah, that's us, right? But again, a lot of this comes from misinformation, disinformation, and anti-information. So the counter to that is just to give them information, knowledge about what it actually is.
Do you think that you get good reception from people?
Yeah, from some. From others, they're just like, well, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm not going to get a husband if I don't go to church, so whatever. But, one thing that I've found for a lot of people is that they dumb things down for Ghanaians. So they say, oh, Ghanaians will never, like even Ghanaians themselves, they go, oh, Ghanaians will never get it, so you just got to say that they're Hebrews anyway. Like I got a colleague who is like, he's like, I know that this whole Hebrew thing is a lie, but I still say it because you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. So I'm like, I think that's a bit of an ethical problem you got going on there.
And he's
So
telling his students this?
yeah, he tells everybody who will listen to this, he won't pass an opportunity to say, yes, we're the original Israelites in Israel. And I've shown him the information. I'm like, this is the actual information. He's like, yeah, I know, but you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. So, and he's much older than me. So it's not so much I can do other than like, I don't know, body slam. What can I do? So, but for me, I'm like, there has to be a change because there was a time even 100 years ago where not everybody was a Christian. Not everybody was praying to an imaginary white man image of Caesar Borgia, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI. So, there had to have been a change to get people to be stupid. So therefore, and I'm using that term very selectively, not in the sense that people are inherently stupid, but they've been stupefied. And stupefied not in the sense of scared, like made intentionally stupid to the point where no critical thinking can go on, to the point where they hate themselves. Then once you get this imaginary white Jesus, then you have to make your skin look like this imaginary white Jesus through the bleaching cream. You have to make your hair look like dog fur or horse fur or something else, because all of this is an effect of the self-hatred that your enemies have done. So all of these things that look like different things, these are just symptoms. All of it really comes down to these white people who have done this intentionally. Now they're reaping the benefits.
That was one conclusion that I come from, like the issue of like the global supremacy issue. It's the same everywhere, just shows itself in different signs and symbols. Like I don't think that I've seen a black baby doll the entire time that I've been here.
You have to come to my house.
I was going to.
That's their refuge. They're refugees at my house. All the black baby dolls.
I've seen, and then I was like on Spintex, and I saw this poster that it said like the mirror to yourself, like be the perfect white, and I was like, oh my god, because the other bleaching commercials, they're just not as blunt, right? And so it was just like,
yeah, I just saw that exact same billboard coming down from Mampong, and I was like, if we had enough sense, people would burn that thing down. You know what I'm saying? People themselves would just be like, go get some petrol, we got to burn down another sign today. But instead, people run headlong to it. So this is where we are. We are now reaping the repercussions of miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. So the colonial thing was a whole lot of work for white folks. Now this is remote control self-destruct through neo-colonial things. So they'll put up a KFC or a Pizza Hut, instead of you burning it down, you go in to eat. Yeah, great. So you enrich them as you commit subtle suicide. So there's one thing my father, Dr. Kambon, often says, is that they want to kill us, or they want us to kill ourselves, And in addition to that, they want to make money off of our demising process. So they want to stretch it out. It's not to kill you quick. No, we need you to kill yourself just little by little, and we'll be giving you whatever is tasty to you. And there's another quote from the oldest book in the history of the world, the Instructions to Ptahhotep. And I always cite it, is that one who listens to his belly belongs to the enemy. One who listens to his belly. And, basically the idea is that your enemies create these tastes and desires in you. And then once they do, now they have to be the ones who can fulfill that desire. And they enrich yourself as you are killing yourself. And then also in that same text, it talks about the fool is the one who lives on that which by one dies. The thing that one uses to die, that's what people live on. So picture, I know this food is killing me, and I just love it. I'm just going to keep. Now it's killing you. You know that in 10 years they're going to have to cut your foot off and all these things. But, and this is a text going back some 4,500 years. And it's telling us everything that we need to know right now. But again, most people are illiterate. No one can access this information, even though they could get it in translation. There are hundreds of translations of that one. As a matter of fact, there's a group called Shemsu Bak that I'm working with to translate it into various African languages, including Akan, Yoruba, Kikongo, Kiswahili, Wolof, Zulu, Bambara, Hausa, Fulani, and so forth and so on, just to make it more accessible to people, because it's like, if we knew better, we at least have a possibility of doing better. If you don't know anything, then what can you do but just wallow in your ignorance?
So in terms of like knowledge and like ignorance, based on past movements and contemporary movements for like whatever you want to call it, like like Black Power in the U.S., what do you think, and like where do you stand on the spectrum?
In terms of Pan-Africanism knowledge,
the contemporary movements in the U.S.
Right.
In this fight for like Black liberation.
This is the thing. So, like, when you're talking about Pan-Africanism, you're talking about like that basically as a synonym for Black liberation, right? Now you have this is a whole nother thing. You have people who use the term Pan-Africanism not to mean Black people. They mean anyone who happens to be on the African continent, whether they are our original Arab imperialist enemies, whether the Dutch Boers in South Africa, whether it's the British out of Zimbabwe or whatever, whether it's the Chinese in Uganda or Indians in Uganda. So this is a thing. It's a very at this point in time, I would say, contested term, and it's contested because you have these people who are Black on the outside but very anti-Black in any and every way that they can be. So the original term Pan-Africanism was coined for this 1900 conference on Pan-Africanism, where everything that they said about Pan-Africanism was talking about Black people, so that the Negroes can establish a great central race in Africa, so that Black people can have Negro people, meaning Black people, can have respect in the white countries, so that they can also do commerce and all these. But every single thing that they were talking about was talking about Negro, meaning Black people. But you have now, and some of them even right here in this institute, who, when they're talking about Pan-Africanism, they mean everybody but Black people. They mean Pan-Africanism to be continentalism, meaning Arabs, right? So these same Arabs who have invaded Kemet, invaded Libya, invaded all these places where they are now. And this is the hypocrisy of the double standard, that some of them are at least what I would call half-Africans, meaning half Black and then half whatever their mamas are or fathers are, or maybe even fully Black, but ideologically they have a white father called Marx or Engels or whatever, or a white father called Jesus. You understand? Yes. So it means that they are compromised Africans. You can never be fully for Black people because you got a white mama, and you can rail against white folks, but not my mama. So there's a limit, a glass ceiling to which some of these folks are willing to take. Not only they're compromised biologically, genetically, biogenetically, we could say, ideologically, religiously. The whole point of giving you this white religion, whether it's Christianity or Islam or whatever, or Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever, is to make you compromise, so that instead of fighting for your own Black people, you'll now fight on behalf of the one who gave you your ideology or your religion or your whatever that they gave to you. So all of this is to say, for some of these folks who are what I would call Africans, or even less, what they attempt to do is hijack the term Pan-Africanism from the ones who originated the term to mean black people to again mean anybody but black people. So it's a contested term, especially where we have to get to. As a matter of fact, what I want to do, I want to pull up the original definition of Pan-Africanism. There's a scholar named Chinwezu, and I want to read out the 7 points that he outlines for this coining of the term Pan-Africanism.
I never considered other people besides black people in the term Pan-Africanism.
You wouldn't.
I didn't know that people did.
Yeah, we got some very high up people here at this institute, as a matter of fact, whose names I won't call, but who do exactly that. So these are the 7 points by those who founded the term Pan-Africanism. 1, to promote unity, feeling, and friendly intercourse among the peoples of the Negro/African race. That's black people. To achieve self-rule with civil rights and responsible black governments for colonized Negro countries. Still talking about black people. To achieve voting rights, physical security, prosperity, progress, and justice for Africans abroad. And that's Negroes in the countries of the white race. Again, that's black people. To promote the business interests of Africans abroad, African people living in the countries of the whites. Again, talking about black people. To create, and I quote, a great central Negro state in Africa for the black race. Now we're looking at what's now Congo for that. To secure integrity and independence for self-governing Negro countries. And they mention by name Ethiopia, Haiti, Liberia, and any others that emerge. Again, talking about black people. And then to earn for the Negro race equality with and the respect of the other races of humanity. Again, talking about black people. But you have, from the 1945 Pan-African Congress, you have a hijacking of the term Pan-Africanism by people who wanted to go and marry Arabs. And I'll say that without mentioning any names specifically. But this is a hijacking of the term. So now let's look at the fallout of that. They mentioned Haiti by name in the 1900 conference, right? Let's fast forward to 2016. Haiti applied for the African Union, and they didn't get in. Morocco applied for the African Union, a place that's still enslaving black people to this day, and they got in. That tells you how much that term has been hijacked. So the black people who the name was invented for, the term Pan-Africanism was invented for, you keep them out of this so-called Pan-African organization, and the ones who it was not invented for, you let them in. And matter of fact, I got colleagues who are here who are fighting for the rights of the Sahrawi people, another Arab people who are on stolen land. So Kemet means, when you have the determinative of people, it means black people. We have the determinative of a human settlement, it means land of the black people. So that means anyone who you find on this continent who is not black is an invader. They are on stolen land of black people. And matter of fact, I was just looking at a documentary called The Black Mummy of the Green Sahara, something to that effect. And it found, uncovered a mummy, I want to say about between 5,000 or 7,000 years ago. The exact days escaping me, but somewhere, thousands of years ago. And it's before even Kemet started mummifying. So here you find in the Caucasus Mountains in southwestern Libya, what's now southwestern Libya, you have a mummy of a little black boy, 2-year-old black boy who has been mummified. So this is before the Gaddafis came. You have somebody blacker than any of us mummified there in Libya. But now you think about Libya, you think about these Arab invaders, not the original black people, but you still have pockets of the black people who are, still there. But all of this is just to say, you have people who, when they're talking about Pan-Africanism, they're only talking about, let's fight for the rights of the Sahrawi people. It's like, this is what I was driving home with, the hypocrisy. So here you have these Africans who have gone to the diaspora, and they've used the principle that a change in location has not fundamentally changed their nature, and they still have something to say about Africa because they're still Africans. And that part I can get with, right? You're black because you just were taken from a place. It's like what Malcolm X used to say: if a cat has kittens in an oven, that doesn't make them biscuits. So you've taken African people from the continent, put them somewhere else, they're still African. But if they were actually principled, they would take that exact same thing. Well, what if you take an Arab from Saudi Arabia, drop them off in Africa? Does that change their fundamental nature? No. So the exact same principle that you apply that gives you a right to say that you're African, how come you're not willing to apply that principle to these Arab invaders who are occupying North Africa? Because they have absolutely no principles. Most of them are at white universities. Most of them claim to be socialists, but are all, obese. So it's like, how are you going to say you want to share the wealth with all people equally? You ain't even willing to share your sandwich. Can you share a pizza with somebody before you talk about let's all share the wealth? And my point isn't that capitalism, socialism, all these isms, to me, it's all just one thing. All of it is just a subterfuge to put you, the black person, off on a dummy mission. And coming back to this exact same point, that not only are we sent off on a dummy mission, it's basically like good cop, bad cop, and this is what they do, because all of them are working at white universities or whatever they're doing, all getting bankrolled by white folks or Arabs or whatever. But the good cop, bad cop is that they say the capitalists are bad, but the white socialists are good. No. This is good cop, bad cop, just as we saw in Cuba, just as what we saw in Russia, just as we saw everywhere else. None of them are willing to change the dynamic of white on top, black on the bottom. So you have all these black people who will boo-hoo over Castro, but he has a predominantly black nation. Why can't a black person run Cuba? You understand?
Very anti-black.
Very anti-black administration of all of that. So if you want to go to Fidel or Raul or Che Guevara or whoever else, is a single one of them willing to change that fundamental thing of white on top, black on the bottom?
So what about the fact that when Castro died, like he's all these African countries, like all the stuff that he did for them, you have in the U.S. people are really like happy about it, but then in Africa they're really like celebrating him.
My question is, was he willing to change white on top, black on the bottom? Same thing, like people always drag him out or drag out John Brown. For John Brown's plan, he planned on once they are successful, then they go to Canada and he is the president. And then maybe Frederick Douglass will be vice president. So none of them are willing to change white on top, black on the bottom. Until you're willing to deal with that, there's no revolution. It's just a change in power from this white guy to another white guy. This is the point, for the good cop, bad cop, because some will say, oh, well, the white communists are bad and the white capitalists are good. No. Or the white capitalists are bad and the white communists are good. No. That at the end of the day, both of them plan on perpetuating their existence. That's what they all have in common at a fundamental, basic level, is that all of them want to exist. And I came to this I'm not the first person to come to this. Like Francis Cress Welsing would talk about their concern about white genetic annihilation. Multiple people have spoken about this. But where I really got a chance to see it is my father made a comment on C-SPAN, and it was railed against by all white people, because he said that basically they need to be gotten rid of. Now, the so-called good liberal white ones, they didn't want to get eliminated. The so-called mean white ones, they didn't want. I was like, this is what they have in common. That's the point. So at a fundamental level, whatever they do, whether they're being mean to you, they're being mean to you because they don't want to be eliminated, and they think that being mean to you is a way to make sure that they stay on the earth. If they're being nice to you, the same thing. The ultimate goal is to make sure that they stay on the earth. And it's, an analogy of, here's one loaf of bread, these are the resources on the planet, and they have a choice of saying, am I going to give this to my white child or to this black child over there? Now for them, they always make the right decision for them, which is give the loaf of bread to their own white children. But for us, we say, you know what, let's give the loaf of bread to the white children. And it's like, well, what about our children who are starving? No, that's not our orientation because of miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. So anybody you trot out for me, I ask, are they willing to change that fundamental dynamic of white on top, black on the bottom? And you never see that, because that's one of the things that is to them the most fundamental thing that makes sure that they are able to perpetuate themselves. Self-preservation, the first law of nature. And for them, white on top, black on the bottom is the way to ensure that they are able to have progeny, and to have those progeny survive and or thrive or whatever. So that's the one thing. Whatever we call classism, they're willing to let that go. On the drop of a dime, they'll say whatever we call ourselves capitalists, but we're going to have land grants, all of Oklahoma, all of, like, that's not capitalist at all. But they're willing to let go of the capitalism at the drop of a dime to perpetuate what their real goal is, which is their self-preservation. If they call themselves, whatever, socialists, whatever they call themselves, they racist, they can say, no, racism, whatever that is, we're willing to let at least racism, the surface one of being mean to you, they'll let that go. They'll be very nicely, they'll pat you on the top of the head all day long, let you be President Obama, whatever. But what they're not willing to let go is the fundamental thing of self-preservation, and all of these other things that are just smoke and mirrors and subterfuges just to make sure that they're able to perpetuate themselves. Yeah. Good cop, bad cop.
So what do you think is wrong with the contemporary movements now? Besides like the major lack of leadership?
The main thing is the hijacking of the term, because everything is going to come from your concepts. So if you have Africans who are intentionally, it's like here you have a Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? You started a foundation that's crooked, so anything you build on top of that is going to go what? Nothing but crooked if it's not firm from here. And that's basically what's going on. So the main thing that's wrong is that you have people who've hijacked the term Pan-Africanism to mean Pan-Arabism, let's just integrate with whoever happens to be on the African continentism or whatever, to exclude black people, to the point of in real life they excluded Haiti, who the term Pan-Africanism was invented for. You exclude Haiti, you understand? And there's no outcry of that from any of these people who call themselves Pan-Africanists, because that's the whole point, to dilute any black causes, just as Marx told you to do, because it's about class or whatever he said. Anything that could get black people to what we are supposed to be from the original concept of modern Pan-Africanism, they're going to cut that out and dilute that and say, no, don't organize yourself along the fact that you're black. Organize yourself along class lines, or organize yourself along gender lines, or organize yourself along any lines other than black, right? So anytime you have anybody who's telling you organize along any other lines, it's because they're serving a white master, whether that white master calls itself capitalist or communist or feminist or any other ist. The whole point is to subvert black people and to make sure that this stays in place, white on top, black on the bottom.
So in a Ghanaian context, where do you think the African Americans fit in?
Well, anyone who identifies themselves as Americans, most likely they're going to be a proxy for white culture, because to even name yourself after Amerigo Vespucci is saying, yeah, I accept being like an honorary white person. For myself, as I mentioned before, I identify as African, anti-American, right? That means if there's a flag, you spit on it or burn it, or you do whatever you can, or even just keep it on the pole as you do it so it doesn't come within 50 meters. But yeah, anyone who identifies as African American in the first place, the whole point of that term, of that concept, is to co-opt, right? Even to talk about Ghanaian or Nigerian or whatever other identity you have, this is the point. So I'm working on a book, and that was my presentation, The Ancient African Origins of Pan-Africanism. So when we say Kemet means land of black people and black people, what makes that so profound isn't the fact that they were building pyramids or temples or all this great glory. Well, the fact is that they said whatever else we call ourselves, you people there, you call yourselves Tasseti, you people, you call yourselves Waset, you people, you call yourselves Min Nefer, you people, you call yourself, Kim Ur, whatever you call yourselves, all those identities are subsumed under the fact that we're all Kemetu, black people. That's what's profound. You understand? So that's the ancient Pan-Africanism. So all of these nationalities or all these identities are there to prevent us from saying, you know what, at the end of the day, we're all black people. And this is generally the orientation of black people in the so-called diaspora, is that if you see black people in Brazil, you're like, that's my kinfolk. We're all black.
That's right. No matter where you go, you always there's that black look.
Exactly. Exactly. If you see black people in Cuba, you be like, that's my folks. You see black people in Ghana, you be like, that's my folks. You see black people in Australia, you be like, that's my folks. In the Pacific Islands, that's my folks. Because that's your orientation, is to look, we're all black people, whatever other identity. And this is the reason for this big, matter of fact, Donald Trump, he said we got to stop calling it Black History Month, we call it African American History Month, because the point is to make all of you into fragments, to the point that your fragments always supersede the fact that you have this in common. We have common enemies. Just like the original Pan-Africanism in Kemet 5,000 plus years ago, that was black people coming together to fight against this Eurasian enemy who's right at the doorstep in southwestern Eurasia, right? So in the autobiography of Winnie, he says, when His Majesty, talking about the ruler, took action, meaning military action against these Eurasian sand dwellers, he made an army of both sides of the house, meaning, east and west of, Kemet, upper and lower Kemet, from Kensedru, from Wawat Nubians, from Irjet Nubians, from Kau Nubians, from every kind of Nubian, and from Chimeland, which was basically as far south as you can get in the Nile to the west. But basically every black person in the world that we know of in proximity, we're all taking military action against this enemy. And this is the very oldest, most complete historical document from Kemet, is all these black people coming together to fight against these Eurasian enemies who are now, ironically, right there in Egypt, and who many black people think have always been there, which of course they haven't. So, all of this is to say the concepts are very important. So even to say African American is to say I assent to this whole thing of a fragmentation of all these black, because that's what was very scary for white folks, is that, look, we got all these black people saying black power. You got people in Congo saying, you got people all over Brazil saying that, all these black people are uniting around the fact that they're black. And that is scary because that can subvert their self-preservation, which is their ultimate goal, right? Whatever else they use as a tool to accomplish that goal, whether it's classism or racism or genderism or whatever ism, all those are just instruments and tools. And I'll give an analogy of if you have someone who is torturing you, right? So you're the torturer, I'm the torturee. And what we end up doing is, here you take a corkscrew, you shove it into my eye. Now, as opposed to me doing something against you, I say bad corkscrew and then I beat it up. And that one is called capitalism. I'm beating up the corkscrew. Why don't I do something to the one who's shoved this capitalist corkscrew into my eye? Because I'm not taught to do that. I'm not trained to do that. Good boy, yes, just ha ha ha, here's a bone. Now you take something else, here's a whip, and then you slash it across my face, pat, pat, pat. And I say, oh, bad whip, bad whip. Instead of the person, the torturer, and that's anytime you have anybody who says any ism is a problem, they are intentionally trying to swing at mirrors. They're swinging at concepts, empty things in the air, as opposed to, why can't you say that the one who invented that concept? You understand? Because all of these problems that we say we have, conceptual, whatever, all of them have the same source. You understand? Yeah. And it's a very easy, I'm not like a brilliant genius. It's like the one who created it is the problem. But again, it's interesting, and I mentioned this before, there's a documentary called Cosmos by this astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's at the Hayden Planetarium. And in one of the episodes, I want to say episode 2 or 3, he starts off showing himself sitting by a fire with a dog. And, up comes a wolf behind him. And he takes a firebrand out of the fire, he shoots a wolf off. And he's like, yeah, thousands of years, well, thousands or millions, however, years ago, there were certain wolves that, because of their genetic composition, their chemical makeup, they were less scared of fire than other ones. And those were ones that were willing to stay around the campsite just to get the crumbs or the scraps or the whatever. And those are the ones that ended up being dogs, right? So So the dog, this is an example of what's called artificial selection, because now people breed. So every single kind of dog is ultimately traced from the very first wolves, but now you have dogs who are willing to fight against wolves, sheepdogs and whatever, who are willing to fight against wolves that they are ultimately cousins of. And then, and I thought that that was profound. And then later on in the same episode, they go into bears, which are also, interestingly, in the same genus of canine. That, bears and dogs don't look related, but on a fundamental genetic level, they are. And he talks about polar bears. So he says all bears are descended from black bears originally, but now you have some of them who wander into a very snowy, icy terrain, and here you have a genetic copying error. Now, if this happened in the equatorial region, it would be a problem, but here it happens to be a fortuitous mistake, because now this one comes out white instead of coming out black. Now the one that comes out white is better able to hunt, because the prey don't see it coming as easily. It's able to get penguins or whatever it gets. And now this one is able to outcompete the other bears. So now it gets a chance to mate with other bears. Now this one has, out of 5 bear cubs, maybe 2 of them come out white. And then this is perpetuated until we eventually get what we now know as a polar bear, right? So, all this, that's talking about natural selection. So the first one is artificial selection. That's with the dogs coming from wolves. This one is natural selection, where just, these natural processes take place. So I actually want to do an article on this, that our problem or our situation is analogous to those two things.
I have read an article that said that like the white skin is like a gene copying error.
Yeah. But the point is how that affects us as black people. So if we're looking at this as a gene copying error, and they've actually traced it down to a gene called SLC24A5, which for Eurasians they have threonine, right, instead of alanine, the original. And even if you look at a population graph on the map that shows all these places where for that specific gene they have threonine, those are contiguous with the white places in the world, whether Sweden or whatever. And then the places that has the original gene of alanine, those are, the places where you have black populations. So anyway, all of this is to say that what we have as black people, especially these people who are serving these white agendas, are basically people who are willing to be dogs. Because if you allow yourself to go along with, all these other types of analyses, then they pat you on the head and give you a grant, or give you a job, or give you a car, or whatever. And what they're doing is essentially saying that I'll allow these 2 black people to mate, and you'll be successful as long as you go along with the program. But these other ones, and that's, in different accounts they talk about that that's what they would do on the plantation, that the ones who are most rebellious, something got stolen, we just blame him. We know you didn't do it, but we don't care. That the whole point is just to exterminate the ones who are a problem, and then allow the ones who are willing to go with the okie doke. Those are the ones who are allowed to mate, to breed, to do whatever, to be successful, to be the good house Negro. So our situation is, do we want to be dogs, or do we want to be human beings? Or at least in this analogy, do we want to be bears? So we are going through our own processes of natural selection. So the most strong, whether that's Patrice Lumumba, whether that's Thomas Sankara, whether it's Amilcar Cabral, all of them are allowed to flourish. Whether it's Malcolm X, whether it's Marcus Garvey, all of those are allowed to flourish because it's a natural system. But on this system, as long as it's white on top, black on the bottom, they're the ones who decide who is able to perpetuate themselves and who gets eliminated through a coup d'etat, who gets eliminated through assassination, who gets eliminated through you just don't have a job, so now you turn to drinking or to drugs, and then you just eliminate yourself. So they still make money off of your demising process, what my father calls subtle suicide. So when we're talking about the fundamental problems, I think that just even using the term African American is a problem. But by the same token, I think using the term Ghanaian is a problem, Nigerian is a problem. Any of these can be problems if we're not willing to subsume whatever identities you have under the fact that we're all black and we have common enemies and a common destiny, common descendants, and we need to be looking at our own self-perpetuation as a race.
So how do you self-identify?
African anti-American.
African
Anti-American. And for that, I always put African equals black. So when I write, I'll put an equal sign between African equals black, just because of this revelation I'm telling you about. You have people who are saying African, but they don't mean what I mean when they say African. So I have to say that this is, clear. Now, the other thing is that this is extremely easy when you're speaking African languages. So for Chi, for example, the exact same word for African means black person, the same word for black person means African. So it's only English or other white languages like that have this problem. So this is why language is so important, because if I say Obibini, the BB part means black. So when I say Obibini, I'm saying black person literally, and that's the exact same thing as saying African. There's no other way to say it unless you use a term from English or from somewhere else. But in the language itself, same thing in Yoruba, Adulawo. Same thing in Bambara, Farafin, Farafina. Same thing in Kikongo, Bandombe, in Sia Bandombe. That's the way to say Africans. That's the way to say land of Africans. If I talk about Wolof, Nit Kunyur, that's talking about people who are black. Nit, person, Ku, who is, Nyur, black. You can go all the way to Kemet, black people. So anytime we're talking about the land of black people or the black people, it's always this is black people, this is land of black people. Then you can even look at Arabic, that the way they describe our land is Bilad as-Sudan, land of black people. If you look at Greeks, Ethiopia, they're saying, burnt faces, talking about the land of those whose faces are black. So none of them are talking about the soil, meaning that the soil is black. They're talking about the people. So that's why it's so ridiculous that you have these white Egyptologists who are doing what white folks do, self-preservation, which is to say, no, they weren't black, they were just talking about the soil is black. But when you go into the mythology of the people of Kemet, they said they were molded on a potter's wheel from this black mud, from this black clay, by Khnum, on this potter's wheel. So even if you want to say that they're talking about the soil is black, the black people are saying we're made from this black soil. How do you get anything else out of the black soil of the Nile? So yeah, I think that is a major problem, is our conceptual, because once you get misconceptions in your head, then everything else you do, because let's say you take on the term African American, now you have to live that out. What does an African American do? Well, now they have a ready set of pathologies of what African Americans do. Better go to KFC and eat your chicken and get high blood pressure and get you some hypertension and whatever else, all these things. So you have to live that out, and this is blackness as defined by your enemies of what black people do. So you have some people who think that being black is being on food stamps, even though by number and percentage we're not. Right, exactly. But I had a colleague who was at a open forum, and she was like, yeah, because we black, and I remember being on food stamps. I was like, I think that's the white side of your family, that's not the black side of your. Because, a lot of black people are, a bit proud. They're like, I don't want to be on that. If I got to do whatever, scrape, my father cleaning chimneys, we going to do that. That's white welfare. That's welfare, is white welfare. So, all of that is just to, come full circle. If you have any self-identification that's given to you by your enemy, most likely it's something that's not intended for your self-preservation, it's for theirs. And that's why they're giving it to you, because then you become an agent in their preservation.
So, are you a part of the African American Association of Ghana?
I haven't paid dues in a minute.
But do you participate in activities? You go to meetings?
No, because a lot of this is the whole point, and I can drive this home just for the reason why I don't, is that here, if you have something that's called an African American, now it comes to what does an African American do? So they have events like, we're going to go celebrate the 4th of July. I've never celebrated the 4th of July a day in my life. So why am I going to come all the way to Africa and start celebrating the 4th of July? Have you ever heard of Frederick Douglass? What did he have to say about it? You know what I'm saying? He's not the most revolutionary guy, but he's at least, talking about this exact same thing we're dealing with.
Do they celebrate Juneteenth?
They do celebrate Juneteenth.
Okay.
They do celebrate Juneteenth. They have Juneteenth, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, which they call, what do they call it? Giving thanks. They just changed it. They said, let's not call it Thanksgiving, let's call it giving thanks. But, all of these things come from, if you have somebody who's giving you an identity, a ready-made identity, now you have to start acting that out. So now you got to go get your turkeys. I was like, where does that come from? What is, understand? So, I can understand, especially for people who grew up with that, because they're, you know, it's like a habit. One who listens to his belly belongs to the enemy. If you've gotten a taste and a desire in your mouth for your turkey on Thanksgiving, that's not going to go away. You got to start with some children who don't have that. So for me, I've never had that, so it's not even, but I understand that that's what they're doing. But again, if you have this term African American, now you actually have to live that out. So what do African Americans do? Well, they keep their hair like this, trying to make it look like a horse or a dog or anything, any mammal other than a real human being, which is an African, not mixed with Neanderthal. Right? So that's what you have to do, is you have to do what that group does, as defined by your music videos, as defined by the miseducation system that makes everybody want to be a white boy or a white girl, as defined by the movies where they tell you anytime they say the word beauty, they show you a picture of something that looks like a shaved pig or a shaved dog, and then it's a white girl, and it's like, well, now I have to. You understand? So all of these complexes and problems come out with all these other types of identification. But I wouldn't limit it to that. I would say any of these terms like Afro-Cuban or Afro-Brazilian or Afro-Argentinian or Afro-Peruvian or Ghanaian or Nigerian or South African. Look at South Africa. They're killing other black people there because they have this fragment identity. They're killing black people. But the white folks who stole their diamond mines and their platinum mines, no, y'all just go for it. Yes, sir. Yes, boss. Go ahead. But black people, no. But this is what happens when we don't understand that we have this common identity and whatever. So it's very difficult to get people to give up those identities. It's possible, but at the very least, you have to subsume whatever else you call yourself under the fact that we're all black. We have common enemies. We have common descendants who need to exist and who is not looking like they're doing well on that category because they're being shot, raped, murdered, Ebola'd, or whatever else to death. So, what do we do about these enemies who are committing genocide every single place on the face of the planet, right?
Do you think that, like, sometimes the anti-American, this comes off as, and can be seen as, like, anti-white? I know a lot of literature.
It could.
A lot of literature talks, like, makes it synonymous with one another.
For me, American and white are very much synonyms, right? And so your first off is named after Amerigo Vespucci. That's not very black or anything else. But just in terms of what that place was founded for, based on the genocide of the people who were there, and then the enslavement of us. You understand? So I see it as a place that was founded in evil, and that will also end in evil. So when I say American, first off, because I was born with an African name, I'm not somebody who would like to take a white name and then give myself that white name. Say, call me a Vespuccian or American or Columbusan or any of these whatevers. So yeah, I think that is a problem when we identify as such. But I think those two are very much intertwined. When you're saying American, you mean white. When you say white, you mean American. And when before we were talking about Pan-Africanism, America is really Pan-Europeanism, even in terms of these embargoes against black people coming in to bring in all these Eastern Europeans, the Polish, and it's a planned community of the heights of Pan-Europeanism, with white on top, black on the bottom. And with that, if you look at something like how that played out just in terms of the controlling of population. So you have places like South Carolina where you had a black majority, and that's probably the textbook case of black majority, how they brought in Germans and Polish and Slavic and Irish and British and French and everything else that you can imagine to swell up those numbers. And I definitely see American as equaling white, white as equaling American. And those who want to be part of that, you have to take it like the Twin Towers coming crashing down. So when it's time to pay, whether that's an inside job, as some people say, or an outside job, if you are there inside of this place that was founded on the extermination of some people, genocide of some people, enslavement of other people, and now you're saying, you know what, I want some of the ill-gotten goods, You understand? All right, I understand that you're committing armed robbery with this gun, but my great grandpa is the one who made the gun. So that's what you have when you have people saying, "Yeah, we built the country." It's like saying my ancestors built the gun at gunpoint.
Yeah.
That's now being used to go and rob everybody else in the world. And now, instead of doing something about it or taking the gun away or doing anything, I just want some of the ill-gotten goods. You understand? So just shoot me 20 Ghana cedis. I'm not going to tell anybody that that's what you're doing, and I'm not going to oppose you. And I think it's a very compromised position, and this is the way that they create compromised black people, is by letting you in on the crumbs that come from raping the African continent, as they're still doing right now. And everybody is complicit to some degree or another, because if you even look at the Eastern Congo, you have coltan there. So this whole war in the Eastern Congo is mainly around coltan and the rainforests, all these resources that are there. So if you have a cell phone, then guess what? You're complicit in this thing. So they're just making sure that you get enough of the little benefits, quote unquote, to just shut up. You understand? Don't shake the boat. White on top, black on the bottom, and out of that you can get an iPhone. Out of that you can get a Land Cruiser. So just shut up and go along with the program. But there are some who don't necessarily want those quote unquote benefits. They want to change this thing.
So how do you try to like make a positive change like within Ghana and like outside of Ghana? Or do you not go back to the US anymore?
I don't go to the US anymore, but what I have a website where I teach African languages. It's called Abibi Tumikasa. It's also an app. So this is part of my extension outreach activities that I refer to collectively as the Under Ocean Railroad. Right? So we have the Underground Road.
Yes.
Now we got the Under Ocean Railroad. Follow the drinking gourd. Right? So, with that, I'm teaching African people how to re-Africanize. We had repatriation courses, course on African history, so on and so on, to get people, to come. We just have the Sanko 5 journey where we brought 25 Africans this time from, mainly the U.S. over here, helping them to repatriate, to invest, all these things. And anytime what I'm doing this video, anytime I do a video, I'll put it online. Now, if I put it on YouTube, I never comment on YouTube because I don't comment on any white social media. So I've removed I quit Facebook 2010. I quit WhatsApp, I want to say either 2015 or 2016. So all the white social media, I don't comment, I don't write, if you contact me there, please don't contact me saying I have an asthma attack, because you'll never get a response. It's not that I don't love you, it's just I'm not doing it. But I use that as content for Abibi Tumikasa, which is my own site. So I'll label it Abibi Tumikasa. I'll tell people, if you want to join the conversation, you have to be on a black site. Because this is the hypocrisy, is that we'll be on white sites talking about how we need to do for ourselves. You understand? How ridiculous is it? Yeah, they always tried to, the integration was so bad for us, it destroyed the Negro Leagues and blah, blah, blah. I can't believe we did that back then. And then we're sitting on white websites talking about how we need to do
for ourselves. How do you think that we reach people who don't have access to that type of education, which is the majority of black people in America? Like, how do you, like, if you're working with the people in Ghana, like, what does that mean for black people in America?
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. So all of this collectively is part of the Under Ocean Railroad. So, people who come here, like you yourself, you're doing this interview, you're going to go back and do whatever that you're going to do, hopefully something positive with this. They'll get different concepts, different ideas, a different orientation to, and this is the thing, as long as you're over there, you're supporting this white world terror domination. So even just to say I'm eating food at a restaurant. So and I always give this analogy of, let's say Black Lives Matter. All right, that's good. You're having a rally, you're having a march. Everybody has their picket signs, right? Now to get the picket sign, people got the paper from like a Walmart or from wherever. So from that cash itself and from the tax on it, they're going to build a prison. So your picket itself, they're going to use that same money that you went to buy it in order to buy a bullet that's going to shoot a black person. So anything that you do on a fundamental level is still supporting. You're saying, I want this thing to fall, but you are not you specifically, but all of us who are over there are the props that keep it around, that keep it alive, that keep it standing. If we just remove the props, the thing falls. But we're not willing to do that because, again, here's an armed robber who slides you 20 Ghana cedis every time that they do an armed robbery. So the point for me is to get people to, however they can, divest from America and invest in Africa to make Africa great again. And I actually have a talk by that same thing. And I give the analogy of, like, here you have a white pool. Here's a white pool. Now, what most people talk about doing, even when we say let's circulate the money in the black community or whatever, all these things sound positive, but it's like the equivalent of, they have these machines that are pool warming. They warm the water, where they'll, it's a suction pump that pulls the water out on this side and runs it through a black hose, and then it lets it go right back into the white pool that started. And that's what we're essentially talking about doing. Let's just let it grease the inside of here a little bit, but then you're dumping it right back in the white pool. What we're trying to do is drain this white cesspool, you understand? In order to, what we need to do is fill the black pool, with pure, beautiful black. And when I say black water, in the Songhai language, anytime they talk about something that's pure, that's perfect, that's powerful, they call it black. So when they want to say the purest water, they call it Hari Bibi, the same Bibi that's in tree for black. It means black water. So that's what, I think we need to do, divest from there and invest in here. And different people have different levels to which they can divest. So like my parents, what they did was divesting to the extent that they could, moving out of Brooklyn and trying to become self-reliant. So we always grew up chopping wood with an axe and with a maul, putting it in, that's the heat for our house, you understand? We grew up without a mortgage. We grew up growing our own food. We grew up, pulling our water out of a well. That's how we grew up. That's one level of divestment. But I think there are different levels to the divestment. So we can say, all right, maybe the lowest level is you are there in this white country. You're actively supporting the white country. You're doing whatever. You're Clarence Thomas or this guy, Jesse Lee Peterson. You're just all for Henry Louis Gates. You are just an anti-African, just raging anti-African, anti-black. You're trying to destroy black people. That's one level. But now let's say, all right, you're there in this white country. You're helping it stay up through all the food you eat, everything you drink. If you get shot, then you're paying the ambulance. You're paying the anything you do, whether it's so-called good or bad for you, you're enriching your enemy. But at least you're thinking good thoughts. Now that doesn't mean too much when the towers come tumbling down, whether it's an inside job or outside job, because you're still in there saying I'm going to benefit and get my little car note and do whatever, right? But then let's talk about now you can graduate out of that to another level, which is saying, all right, I'm not going to be there. And that's what, you're talking about AAAG. That's people who are here physically, but are celebrating, 4th of July and Thanksgiving and whatever they're doing. That's another level. But then you can say, all right, people who are here, and now they're actively, trying to build Africa, in every area of activity, in terms of health, in terms of psychology, in terms of social, in terms of economic, in terms of science and technology, in terms of everything we're trying to build. We're here in Africa, helping Africa. So here, if I'm on the road back, I'm buying a mango. That's helping somebody that would have been helped, if I'm over in Whiteville. Here, whatever I do, to some degree, is doing something. But, there are even levels to that. How much more, can you do? We could, let me give you another example. This creation story from what's called Iunu, what they call Heliopolis. They talk about Atum was there in the beginning, and the first children of Atum were Shu and Tefnut and Nut and Geb, each one male-female pairs. Now Shu is wind, right? Tefnut is moisture. Nut is the sky, referring to the sun, solar energy, light, everything celestial up there. And then Geb is the earth. I think that creation story, and this is a creation story going back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that is a plan for development. Solar, wind, water, earth. So with that you have agriculture. With that, and later on Greeks came and said, yeah, the fundamental elements were fire, air, earth. They got that direct from the creation story of ancient Kemet. You have by name Shu, Tefnut, Nut, and Geb. So if you are able to, basically harness all of these for the benefit of African people. This is what we're doing. And then after you're able to harness it, now you have to be able to defend it, because we were harnessing it before, but here you have these white Eurasians coming in, and they're able to, knock it down by turning black people against black people who don't think that they're black people, who call themselves Asante or Ewe or Ga or whatever. If you don't know that y'all are all black, then you just fight other black people, and then the white folks laugh all the way to the bank, because they're sitting at Berlin saying we're only inviting white people to this because we know we're all white. Y'all may think you're whatever you call yourself. You may think you're African American, and that you don't like Afro British, Black British, whatever you call yourself. At the end of the day, all y'all are the same to us. So I think this is really what it comes down to.
So realistically, like reaching the average like black person in America, like who is like going to a public school, like how do you see like yourself helping with that? Because even if I'm writing this paper, but it's like it's academia and like it's not really helping people who don't have the access to those things.
Yeah, I think you have different people who are going to play different roles. So for me, I'm not going to be in Whiteville. I'm not going to be supporting my enemy economically to whatever degree I can. So you have people who are there, and to a large degree, you have some people who are trying to do good work already. So for them, I'm like, more power to you. Whatever I can do to support you in that, to try to get people who are there to divest, to get these ideas that they need to divest, to do whatever. That's great. Keep doing that until you yourself are perhaps able to divest, or more people are able to divest, or on the other side are able to destroy that place from the inside. So if you look at the Hyksos, we were talking earlier about the Hebrews and the Hyksos and all this, that the Hyksos use a base of power called Hutweret, what they call Avaris. So they came, as this invading horde. They ended up making that Hutweret in the Nile Delta their, stronghold. Now, for them to be in there, you had some level of interaction before they were able to, either conquer, quickly or slowly. You have some scholars who think it was a very quick invasion, and that's what the Kemetic sources say. Others say, well, they may have already been there and been doing trade and whatever, and then worked their way in order to finally come out with whatever that they did to take over. I think that a similar thing can be done with black people who are over there, provided they have, the consciousness to do so. So that can be, and I'll give you another example. So you have the British who attempted to take over Haiti. So in Haiti, the Haitian Revolution was able to defeat the French, and then defeated the Spaniards who were on the eastern part of the island. And then the British decided that they were going to come and take over the Pearl of the Antilles. And then 10 to 12,000 deaths later, because the British got their butts whooped, which was supposed to be the mightiest military after Napoleon's, who had also gotten their butts whooped earlier. Then that's where the British decided that they needed to. So this is 1804. Is French being ousted, Haitian independence, whatever. 1807 is when they abolished the so-called trade. Now, why did they abolish the trade? According to white folks, is that they heard violins. They said, "Oh, our hearts are bleeding. Let's help you, black people." No, the British, who were the first ones to do that, they had just gotten their butts whooped in Haiti. You understand? And what they realized from a tactical and strategic perspective, every single boatload of new Africans who were coming in was another boatload of soldiers who are going to whoop their behinds. So they said, what we need to do, and this is, their own words, what they need to do is work on those who had already been seasoned in these seasoning plantations, who were born into enslavement and whatever, and not bring in more black people, which is what we saw repeated again with this whole Ellis Island, bringing in the Eastern Europeans to counterbalance all these black people coming in. Because again, if I'm a military general and every single day or week or month I'm adding more soldiers to the side that I'm fighting and who I just got beaten by, that's not a winning formula. So that's why by 1807 they said, what, we have to stop importing. But they didn't stop enslavement because they had no moral quandary about enslavement. They were thinking strictly in terms of white preservation, just as they always do. They never think about anything else. Anything that looks like something different, it just means you're not looking well because it's always about white preservation. So then fast forward to 1831, 1832, then you have another huge, massive rebellion, the Samuel Sharp Rebellion in Jamaica, right? So now you have more British who are getting their heads chopped off, getting their, places, plantations burned up. And what the British realized within 1 week of finally crushing that rebellion, within 1 week they got together a committee of how to end that type of enslavement altogether. And that's, the genesis of when they switched to the type of enslavement which we have now, which is through the prison industrial complex. It started off with convict leasing, with debt peonage, sharecropping, all the way up to this one. But all of it coming from the 13th Amendment is to make sure black people are working for free. Yeah. They say call it whatever you want to call it. Black people are going to be working for free. We're just going to call it a different name. So all of that is to say, when you look at something like that, from the Haiti example, from the Jamaica example, all of this is strategic. So by the same token, just like in those examples, just like in Kemet, you have the Hyksos, who some scholars think they may have already had some presence in the region due to trade, due to commerce, due to whatever, that they were able to use whatever foothold that they gained in order to overthrow and subvert. That's what some people say Imperium and Imperio is the first one. Some people say Blake is the first one, but the first novel by an African in the U.S. In Blake, Martin Delaney, it's a novel which was serialized in newspapers, where Blake, which is the main character, is able to eventually go off to an island, which is supposed to be like Haiti, get this force together in order to finally make a revolution inside the U.S. So I think that is a potential for those who are still there. It's a very long shot because, enslavement is sweet. One who listens to his belly belongs to the enemy, and all they have to do is keep giving folks Xboxes. I don't even know if that's the new thing, or iPhones, or, virtual reality, or flat screen TVs, or, Pizza Hut, or KFC, or Church's Chicken, or what. So all of these things are to make you compromised. All these ideologies that they surround you with 24/7 are to make you compromise. All these religions that they surround you with 24/7 are to make you compromise. So you'll never really fight for the black cause. Even the people who say that they're fighting for the black cause, all of them are eating food as long as they're over there, which is doing nothing but financing their enemy. All of them are drinking water every day, which is doing nothing and paying their water bill, even in Flint, is doing nothing but financing their enemies. So I think that, that's an extremely, extremely long shot. I think, even the window of opportunity may have been in David Walker's time when he was exhorting us to do that, in his appeal, or Nat Turner's time, or Demar Vesey's time, or Gabriel Prosser's time, or Charles Deslone's time, or any of those folks' time. That may have been really the window, or even the Civil War, because that really is the biggest rebellion of enslaved Africans in the U.S. All these black people who were formerly working for the South, who now either literally as fighting soldiers after they were finally given the go-ahead to pick up the guns, and then those who were helping in other ways. So you have all these African people who are leading this huge insurrection that's able to eventually defeat, one particular type of white folks, the bad cop. We didn't get the good cop, only the bad cop. So I think that's where that is. Where I really think the window of opportunity now is to divest from America, invest in Africa, and make Africa great again. So then whatever needs to be done to America or the U.S., and really America, because that is Pan-Europeanism par excellence. Even the English language has so much French in it, it has so much German in it, it has Irish in it. It's like it has Latin in it when you want to do law, it has Greek in it when you want to do science. They basically looked at, let's get every type of European and just bundle them all together, not only in terms of concepts and language, but also in terms of the actual white folks there. Bring in Italians, bring in whatever, and then make white on top. Let's mix them all together, make them all white. And then all these Africans there, mix them all together, make them all black, and then make sure white is on top, black is on the bottom. The reason why it's such a long shot is because, black people are happy being that dog in the analogy that I was mentioning before. As long as we can get a few scraps from the table, we're not going to rock the boat.
Okay, so my last question is about the patriarchal society, because I'm also doing a gender and sexuality studies minor, and so trying to incorporate that. So a lot of the women I've interviewed said that Ghana is a very patriarchal society, but different from the way it is in the U.S. And so, as a man, how do you see that in difference from the last time you were in the U.S.?
Yeah, this is a thing. When we look at Africa in general, we have to have a very long-term view. Otherwise, we think that West Coast has even been for 100 years, much less 1,000 years, much less 2,000. So the very first female ruler of a civilization, of the very first civilization on Earth in terms of a nation state, was here in Africa. Do you know her? No, I'm talking about Neith-Hotep. This is in the very first dynasty of ancient Kemet.
Yes.
We're not even up to here yet. So this is the very first outright ruler, right, of a nation state in the history of the entire planet Earth, right? Not whatever consort or whatever she's ruling. And then you have Sobek Neferu. That's the second documented female outright ruler, entirely on her own, nobody else. She's just running the show. Now that's happening in Africa. This is in the place that we're talking about now is patriarchal. So to get to this, now we have to get to what changed, but I'm not done yet. So now we come to Hatshepsut, who's the most famous of all of them in antiquity, whose picture just came up on my screen right now. We have all the Kentake queens. We have Amani Renas, Amani Shekento, Shinak Dakete. We have all of these outright female rulers, no king. She's just running the show.
Before the spread of Western.
Exactly. Because what you have at that point in time, in antiquity in Africa, is this idea of complementary opposites. Now, complementary opposites means that this one completes this one. It's not whole, and that's also the concept of the divinity. So anytime you had Amen, you had Mut. Anytime you have Ra, you have Ra'et. Anytime you have, just as I mentioned before, you have Nut and Geb. Nut female, Geb male. You have Tef Nut and you have Shu. So Tef Nut female, Shu. So our concept of the divinity of what Europeans call God or whatever is these are complementary. One is not complete. Just like if I'm a man and I'm sitting here and I say I'm a creator, I want to create life. I'm just sitting in my corner. I'm not going to have any children. Or you as a woman, you sitting over there and say, I'm about to create life. You squeeze, that's not what's coming out. So it's like, you need both. And that's our concept as African people. So from our divine concept, it gives you the idea of how we view things. And that's why we were able to have men as rulers. We were able to have women as rulers. Men could rule outright. Women could rule outright. Right? Now, and there's an author, Sheikh Anta Diop, who has Cultural Unity of Black Africa, African Origin of Civilization, where he basically has what's called the Northern and Southern Cradle Theory, where he says the Southern Cradle, talking about Africa, has a matriarchy-focused society that only in the last few thousand years has started to become more patriarchal, whereas European society, Eurasian society, because I don't like to separate Europe from the rest of Eurasia, because Eurasia is just one landmass, is basically everything that they say. So if you are in a cold, icy tundra, then you have to deal with only the strong survive, survival of the fittest, might makes right, all the things that they are telling you. So if you are in a place where might makes right, if men happen to be physically stronger than women, then it means men are good and women are bad, and that's their whole view. So sometimes I even ask my students here, what is if you're thinking like a white person, what's good and what's bad? If I say white and black, which one is good and bad? If you're thinking like a European, all of them know the answer. I'm like, how did you all know? So they say, yeah, in white thought, white is good, black is bad. And I'm like, I didn't give you a cheat sheet ahead of time. How does everyone in this classroom know that that's the way of thinking? They all know it. I say, all right, here again, white thinking, which one is good, which one is bad? Man and woman, which one is good, which one is bad? I say man is good, of course. Well, you know, that's the whole Adam and Eve story. Eve is made from the man's rib and brought the fall of mankind and blah blah. I'm like, how does everybody know this one? And I can just go through like 30 things. Everybody knows those things. So now, if you want to come up with a divine concept, supposedly divine sacred concept, then you just do addition and you add in all these things that are supposed to be good. So you say white is good, so you get a white man, blonde hair, blue eyes, boom, boom. That's the image that you have on the back of the trotro. It's just a conglomeration of everything that in white thought is good. And then I remember at Kajetia Market at Kumasi, they had a picture of a boxing match and they had a white Jesus knocking out a black devil. And the black devil looked like everybody who's around the market. You understand? So this is what happens. And now what you have is people with black bodies, but they've imbibed this white concept, because all you have to do is get people to believe in God and the devil, and you've got them. Because that means that you are already in this diametric opposites instead of complementary, where this one completes this one, is that this one is against this one. One has to be good and its opposite has to be evil. Right? That's a very Eurasian way of thinking, because I'm a man, I'm good, I'm strong, you're my opposite, so therefore you're a woman, you have to be bad, you have to be evil. And all of their biblical stories, all their whatever stories, all their mythology, Greek, Roman, all of it is just the exact same thing regurgitated. German, folk tales, everything is just the exact same thing, because they're just different manifestations of the same fundamental worldview, which is based on this idea of diametric opposites. This thing is good and its opposite is automatically evil. So just saying all of that to say if we have to first even understand the African worldview before we can even tackle this idea of matriarchy or patriarchy, because the earliest examples of matriarchy are right here in Africa. So now if you have women who are starting off at this plane, now they've gotten down to this plane where they were under the British, and then the men were under the British, so now the men are oppressing the women, or whatever else you got going on here. So now the women get a tick up like this and they say, look at the progress we've made since the white people have come. Because they don't know anything about exactly where they were before and how far they've fallen even to get to this. And now the same white people who put them in that same position, in that lowly position, are saying, yes, we're going to bring you up 1 millimeter. And because we don't know anything before that, we say, thank you for bringing me up 1 millimeter, because those men were doing blah, 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 blah. And all of this is just, again, anytime you have people who are dividing you along any line other than y'all are all black people. Because if, let's say, all the black men are wiped out, let's say either white folks do it or black women say, we got empowerment, we're wiping out all the black people. Guess what happens to all the entire race? There aren't going to be no more black people. And then vice versa. If all the men say, yeah, the problem is feminism or womanism or whatever, Stiwanism or whatever, then they all fighting against the women. This is all white folks laughing all the way to the back. Or if they divide themselves, Ghanaians don't like Nigerians or whatever. So anyway, saying all that to say the origin of matriarchy, and then you still have matrilineal systems here in Ghana. The Akans do matrilineal. If you go to ancient Mali, Mansa Musa, who was the male ruler, he said that he only got to it because of his maternal uncle, Abubakar II, bequeathed it after he decided to cross the Atlantic in ships multiple times. First time his fleet got destroyed, he came back, he went out with another one. So again, you have matrilineal, but what Sheikh Hunter Diop does in his work, he traces these domains of matriarchy and these domains of patriarchy, but it's not an original thought in the instructions to Mary Carré about 4,000 years ago. So basically he's looking at these differences in culture, differences in worldview as attributed to a northern cradle where things are icy or deserty, where that's where you have to be on a might makes right, only the strong survive, survival of the fittest, everything that white folks, Eurasians say, that's actually what they have to live out, as opposed to here in Africa, go pull out down a banana, go pull down we're chilling, you understand? We don't have to be on a might makes right thing. So if you have a woman who may not be the physically strongest person, but she may be the wisest, then even to this day, when they want to do any type of counsel of a major issue, they'll say, we're going to see the old woman, You understand? These are men who are saying we got to go see the old woman. And we have one of our students here who is actually dealing with, she worked for the UN for some time, and all these white folks are like, yeah, we got to empower women. We got to empower women. She's like, women already got power. Just because you don't see them in these white parliaments, in the traditional system, they are the ones who make the decisions. Whether it's the Asante Hene who comes out with a proclamation, that's probably coming from the Queen Mother. That's probably coming from all these women who are doing this. But even that is not the same as what we had in antiquity. So we've had this change,
So do you think that the African American women who come here, they bring with that idea of American or Western patriarchy, and so to them, Ghana is a patriarch society even?
No, I think that what you have is what happened to the society. Yes. If it was matriarchal at one point in time, you still have many places that are still matriarchal. What happened to make some of these places now become patriarchal? And usually you had, especially in places that were terrorized by the British, so-called colonialized by the British, you have the system of indirect rule. So even in places where they didn't have an outright ruler, acephalous societies like the Dagara, or the Gare people, like the Igbo-speaking people, they didn't have any outright ruler. But in the indirect rule, they said, we'll place someone as your king, and that king is going to report to me. So if you all don't pay your taxes to the king, this is the one who does this thing. So what you have is them, of course, taking, the king has to be, of course, a male, and all these types of things. So even in places where they didn't even have it, or in places where they may have had a woman, we hear about Queen Nzinga, Queen Amina, all these, ancient queens. And this isn't even like antiquity. This is like in recent modern history, talking about hundreds of years, not in thousands of years. Now you have, this intentional manipulation of the situation. So to some degree, what they're seeing is an effect, but the problem is they're seeing an effect that they're thinking is a cause. They're saying what I see right now, they're like, all right, look, this is a problem. We need to do something. It was like, how did they even get to be that? And for whose ultimate interest? Who decided to pit men against women, and who benefits and laughs all the way to the bank by now men and women, fighting against each other, black men and black women. When the police come, they're not asking what your gender is. You understand? Whether Sandra Bland, did they say, all right, do you have a phallus or a vagina? No. So, this is, and that's a very blunt way to put it, but none of that matters because we're all in the same boat as black people. We're all subjected to genocide. So what they see may or may not be the case, but we have to always look at it in terms of a lens of a trajectory, a long-term trajectory, and then ask the question, what happened? And what happened isn't a gender thing. These are our enemies who made that happen. So if the genders are fighting against each other, it's not that gender, this amorphous concept, is what we're fighting against. It's the ones who pitted us against each other, so they laugh all the way to the bank.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Is there anything else you would like to share with me?
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I
No
think
problem.
it's going to be really helpful for my research. I've gained a ton of insight things that I hadn't thought about or taken into account that I can now take into account and do more research into. So,
Please do. I don't want anyone to ever believe anything I ever say, ever. I want you to research, because when people say, oh, I don't know about that, that means that's where the learning takes place. Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to do some more research because I didn't know a lot of these really deep backstories.
Okay.
This is really great.
Good.
I'm going to send you an email of the transcript once I get it done.
Okay.
And then my final paper is due in about December.
Okay.
And so I'll also send that to you if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and I'll email you my advisor's information also. So I'll send it to you in the email so you have everything in case you want to contact it.
Sounds good.
So.
Yeah, I think by way of closing, we had ancient Pan-Africanism, which was in Kemet. We had modern Pan-Africanism, and when I say Pan-Africanism, I don't mean the one that these nutty folks do just to get Arab dollars from the oil wells. I mean the real one. And I think I even like there's a scholar named Chinwezu who started using the term Neshni, and Neshni is a term from ancient Kemet which means a willful destruction. He's using that in place of the term Ma'afa or Ma'afa. It also has this concept of genocidal type of destruction, but it can be any type of disaster, whether it's a earthquake or whatever, but it lacks this concept of intentionality. So other people have used the term Mangamizi to refer to the genocide that's been perpetrated against black people. So he's using Neshni because it also has a connotation of this willful destruction. Another possibility is that we could look at these things in terms of, first, we do need to fight for that term Pan-Africanism because it's hijacked. But in addition to that, we can also put other ideas out like Pan-Kemetism, where Kemet means land of black people, and Kemet also means black people depending on which way you write it. So if we're talking about ancient Pan-Kemetism, that's when Upper and Lower Nile came together and brought together all these Nubians into it as well, and Chimay people early on before that got whitenized. All those black people in the ancient times, I think that we can reproduce that to just like how you were talking about the black people in the U.S. or wherever they happen to be, that we can look at Pan-Kemetism as all these lands of black people, all these places that are occupied by black people, whether that's Jamaica or Haiti or DR or wherever, all these black people, now we can look at this building of black power among wherever we happen to be, whether it's the Pacific Islands, southern India, Brazil, all these places. So I think we need to look at ancient Pan-Kemetism to look for lessons of how we did it, because we already did it before, and what were the pitfalls, what happened when we started to allow these Eurasians to come in, what happened, all those types of things, because it's not everything that was in Kemet is automatically good. We have to have a critical analysis and say this is where we were going fine for 2,000 years, then we started doing something different, and then it fell within 1,000. What's up? Critique that, and then also take all of those lessons for the modern Pan-Kemetism in order to see how can we build black power in order to fight off these enemies for the last 5,000 years that we've had.
Okay.
Yeah.
So definitely a lot to think about.
Yeah, good.
And so I definitely will be doing a lot of thinking and more research.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
And this is my little, they talk about Harriet Tubman and these quilts and all these things. So this is my little song, Follow the Drinking Gourd, for those who are still over there. Hopefully the Under Ocean Railroad
Can reach them too.
Yeah, it can reach them too.
I don't know what's going on.
I know what's going on.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
You too.
All right.
I'm going to leave the door open or close it.
You can leave it open. All right, take care. All right, you too.